Welcome to the GMJ Podcast, the official podcast of the Georgian Medical Journal. In this series, we present structured discussions of peer-reviewed contributions published in GMJ, examining their implications for clinical practice, medical education, and health policy. This episode reviews the article titled, "The Power of Modern Public Health in Practice," a Georgian case commentary on risk communication, digital health ecosystems, and regulatory action during the global Nestlé infant formula recall, January 2026.
And it is quite a title, but I mean, the story behind it is just incredibly gripping.
Yeah, it really is. So picture the scene for a second. It is the first week of January 2026. You know, the holiday decorations are coming down. People are just getting back to work. And suddenly this massive public health crisis just erupts across Europe.
Right. And we are not talking about a minor glitch or a small labeling error. This is a massive global recall of infant formula, and it involves Nestlé, which is, obviously one of the largest food companies on the entire planet. It was just a really chaotic start to the year. I mean, within 48 hours, this recall had swept across 50 different countries. The sheer scale of it was completely overwhelming for regulators.
And normally, when we discuss these massive global recalls on our deep dives, we tend to focus on the big markets, right? Like Germany, France, the US, the UK.
Yeah, usually.
But today's deep dive is a little different. We are zooming in on a very specific, almost hidden blind spot in this global crisis. We're going to look specifically at what happened in Georgia.
And it's such a fascinating case study because Georgia found itself in a really dangerous position. The contaminated products were physically sitting right there on the shelves in places like Tbilisi and Batumi, but
if you check the official list, they weren't there.
Exactly. If you looked at the official corporate affected list online, the country of Georgia was completely missing.
Which is just, it's the absolute nightmare scenario for any parent. You hear the news on the TV, you go online to check the official source, and it effectively tells you that you are safe.
But you aren't safe at all.
Right? So today, we are going to explore how independent public health experts in Georgia didn't just sit around and wait for the phone to ring or for the website to update. They actually used digital algorithms and pure speed to essentially force a safety net into existence for you and your family.
It really redefines what we even mean by public health authority these days. The central argument of this article is that in our modern era, protecting the public isn't just about having the legal power to, say, go inspect a factory.
What is it about then?
It is about what they call time to protection.
Right.
It's about actively managing this information gap between what the multinational corporation knows internally and what the general public actually knows on the ground.
Let's dig into that concept for a second, that information gap, because in this specific case, that gap could have literally been lethal.
It absolutely could have been. Think about the structure of a multinational corporation. They possess all the data right from the start.
Right.
They know exactly where the raw ingredients came from, they know which specific batches are contaminated, and they have the shipping manifests.
But getting that out to the public is a whole different story.
Exactly. Their disclosure process is incredibly centralized. It has to pass through legal review, corporate communications, regional offices, translation departments, before it ever hits the public-facing website.
So while all that critical safety data is just stuck in this endless corporate approval loop, the formula is still being bought and sold in supermarkets.
That is the asymmetry right there. The corporation has the information, but the parent standing in the supermarket aisle does not. And that lag creates a very dangerous window of uncertainty.
Yeah.
The thesis of this article, which is offered by Professor Giorgi Pkhakadze, is that national public health systems just cannot afford to wait for that window to close naturally. They have to actively force it shut.
And the article argues that they achieve this through something called algorithm-aware dissemination.
Correct. It is a massive shift from relying purely on statutory authority, the old I am the government, listen to me approach.
Which nobody really listens to anymore.
Right, exactly. To relying instead on digital speed, evidence synthesis, and meeting people where they actually search for information.
Okay, before we unpack the whole tech side of this, which is incredibly sophisticated and really cool, we really need to understand the biology here.
Yeah, that's crucial.
Why was this specific delay so incredibly dangerous? Because the article identifies the main culprit here as cereulide.
This is a critical distinction, especially for the clinicians and the health policymakers listening to us right now. This was not a case of, a foreign object like a piece of plastic or glass falling into a mixer at the factory.
Right. The recall was actually triggered by Bacillus cereus.
Yes, which is a bacteria. But the bacteria itself isn't actually the primary issue here. It is the toxin that it produces, which is called cereulide.
What makes cereulide so different from, say, your standard run-of-the-mill food poisoning?
The absolute key factor here is that cereulide is heat stable.
Meaning you can't just cook it out.
Right. A lot of parents, and even honestly some health providers, operate under this assumption that if you just boil the water when you make the formula, you will kill off whatever pathogens are in there.
Which works for some things.
It works for bacteria like Salmonella or Chronobacter. But cereulide is an emetic toxin. It is a chemical structure that survives boiling temperatures completely intact.
Wow.
So you can boil the water, you can kill the actual bacillus bacteria, but the poison itself remains entirely active in the baby's bottle.
That completely changes the risk profile.
Yeah.
You literally cannot sanitize your way out of this problem at home.
You cannot. And look at the patient profile we're dealing with here. We are talking about infants aged 0 to 24 months.
Very little physiological reserve.
Tiny. If an infant ingests this toxin, it causes severe, violent vomiting. They can spiral into dehydration and metabolic shock incredibly fast.
So the margin for error is effectively zero.
Food safety authorities actually call it a near-zero tolerance approach. You do not wait for a baby to show up in the emergency room to prove that the product is bad. If the risk simply exists anywhere in the supply chain, you must pull that product immediately.
Okay, so we have a heat-stable toxin, a highly vulnerable population, and a ticking clock. Let's look at the timeline of January 2026, because this is where that information gap really opens up wide.
The velocity of this whole crisis was just unprecedented. On January 6th, Reuters broke the news that Nestlé was recalling specific batches in Europe.
And the issue is traced upstream, right, to an ingredient called arachidonic acid oil, or ARA.
Yes, which is a standard additive used for brain development. It is in almost all premium formulas.
Right.
So by January 7th and 8th, the recall had expanded globally. We were talking Africa, Asia, the Americas. We saw major brands like Nan, SMA, Biba, and El Femino all getting flagged.
But here is the massive discrepancy that the article highlights. If a Georgian parent went to the official Nestlé infant formula product depository webpage on January 8th, what did they actually see?
They saw a list of affected countries, but Georgia was simply not on it.
Even though the products were there.
Exactly. Now, the website did include a little legal disclaimer at the bottom saying the list was not exhaustive, but come on, human psychology does not work that way.
No, absolutely not. If I check a safety list to see if my baby's food is poisoned and my country isn't there, I am going to assume I am safe. I will just assume my local store got a completely different safe batch.
And that is the trap. The article points out that Georgian distributors actually source their products from the exact same European factories as the countries that were already on the list.
So the supply chain is completely interconnected.
It is. The official list on the website was just lagging way behind the logistical reality of where the trucks had actually gone.
So enter the Public Health Institute of Georgia, or PHIG. They saw this disaster unfolding in real time, and they didn't just sit around waiting for the website to update.
This is the core finding of the entire commentary. PHIG and Professor Pkhakadze initiated what the article calls a digital ecosystem intervention.
Let's walk through their actions, step by step. January 6th, this is the exact same day the news breaks in Europe. What does PHIG do?
They moved immediately on the signal itself. They didn't wait for an official fax from the ministry or a pristine press release from the manufacturer. On January 6th, they issued immediate public warnings via social media and their own digital platform, which is shinikimi.gij.
That is pretty bold, because if they had been wrong, they would have been accused of causing widespread panic for no reason.
It was a very calculated risk, and it was based firmly on the precautionary principle. They analyzed the global data coming in.
Right.
They saw the contaminant is in the ARA oil, which is a core shared ingredient. The brands affected in Europe are the exact same ones sold in Tbilisi. The biological risk of cereulide is extremely high.
So they did the math.
Exactly. They decided the cost of staying silent was significantly higher than the potential cost of a false alarm.
So they put the warning out into the world. But we all know the internet is just full of noise. How did they ensure that any parents actually saw it? This is where that algorithm-aware dissemination part comes in, right?
This is truly the methodological breakthrough of the whole case. Usually, public health agencies just post a static PDF on a clunky government website and sort of just hope people find it.
Which they never do.
Never. But PHIG treated their health warning like a commercial product that they desperately needed to sell to the search engine algorithms.
The article mentions they used SEO, search engine optimization, but reading through it, it goes way deeper than just throwing some keywords into a blog post, doesn't it?
Much deeper. They utilize semantic keyword mapping, sure, but more importantly, they use something called schema-compatible content blocks.
Schema compatible. Okay, that sounds incredibly technical for a medical intervention. Can you break down what that actually does for us?
Think of it as essentially translating the medical warning into a language that robots natively understand. When Google's web crawler looks at a website, it just sees lines of code.
Right. If you use the right schema markup, you are essentially tagging the data for the bot. You are explicitly telling the algorithm, this block of text right here is a medical warning. This string of numbers is a recalled batch code. This specific brand name is currently unsafe.
Oh, I see. So when the search engine sees those specific tags, it knows exactly what to do with the information instead of just guessing.
Exactly. It allows the search engine to pull that answer directly into the snippet box right at the very top of the search results page, the zero-click result.
So when a terrified parent grabs their phone and types, "Is NN formula safe in Georgia?" they don't even have to click a link or dig through an article. The exact answer is just right there in bold text at the top of their screen.
That is exactly it. It completely removes the friction between the user and the vital safety information.
That is incredibly smart. They also used AI-adapted language. They deliberately wrote their articles with very logical structures and clear reference anchors so that large language models like ChatGPT or other AI assistants would easily ingest their article as a primary authoritative source.
Wow, okay, so if I just asked my AI voice assistant, hey, what is going on with the baby formula recall today, it would pull the answer directly from the PHIG article simply because it was the best formatted source available on the entire internet.
That is the strategy in a nutshell. And the results were highly quantifiable. The article notes that they achieved SEO scores of 90 out of 100. Their independent warning appeared first.
Wow.
Above the official corporate website, and way above all the confused, panicked chatter on social media forums.
That actually brings up a really fascinating point about the misinformation vacuum that always happens during these crises.
Right. In any crisis, if there is no clear official information available immediately, rumors just rush in to fill the void.
Okay.
But by placing high-quality, structured, schema-tagged evidence right at the very top of the search results, PHIG effectively blocked the misinformation before it even had a chance to spread. They filled the vacuum with science.
So the digital campaign is running hot. They are winning the SEO battle.
Yeah.
How did this actually translate into real-world physical action? Because at the end of the day, a website ranking cannot physically pull cans of formula off a grocery store shelf.
It created this incredible pressure cooker effect.
Yeah.
By January 8th, the digital story had migrated over to traditional media. Because the PHIG article was so visible and looked so credible, the national TV channels picked it up.
Makes sense. The journalists are Googling the issue just like the parents are.
Exactly. Professor Pkhakadze was suddenly giving interviews on all the major broadcast networks.
And once it is on the nightly news in everybody's living room, the government literally has to respond.
It forced the issue directly onto the national agenda. On the evening of January 8th, at 21:00 hours, the National Food Agency of Georgia officially confirmed the withdrawal of the specific batches.
So the independent digital actors effectively paved the road,
Yeah.
and the official regulators just drove down it.
That is a very fair assessment. And it really highlights a key institutional implication discussed in the article, which is the difference between authority and credibility.
Go on, flesh that out for us.
Well, the National Food Agency has the authority. They have the actual statutory power to fine companies, close borders, and physically seize products.
Right.
But in those crucial early hours of a fast-moving crisis, they're often slowed down by bureaucratic protocols, interagency communication, and waiting for official diplomatic channels.
But PHIG didn't have to wait for any of that.
No, PHIG had the credibility and the agility to just move.
The article also specifically mentions that PHIG operates without any funding from the food or infant formula industries. Why is that specific detail so relevant to the outcome here?
It is absolutely fundamental to public trust. In any situation involving a massive corporate recall, the general public is naturally going to be skeptical.
Sure, they wonder if the company's hiding something to save their stock price.
Exactly. Or they wonder, is the government moving slowly to protect the national business climate? But PHIG had absolutely no skin in the game.
They had no financial conflict of interest to worry about.
That independence is an incredibly valuable currency. When they came out and said, this product is dangerous, do not use it, People believed them instantly because they knew the advice wasn't being filtered through a corporate PR department or a political office.
It effectively allowed them to totally bypass the cynicism that usually surrounds these massive corporate events.
And that deep public trust is what really fueled the media feedback loop. Journalists are always looking for credible sources during a panic. They gravitated toward PHIG because the data they provided was clear, it was structurally sound, and it was completely unbiased.
I want to zoom out a bit here and look at the bigger picture. We are talking about Georgia, which is a country of less than 4 million people.
Yeah.
But this gap we just described, where the global corporate headquarters essentially ignores or delays info to a local market, that could happen anywhere.
It happens everywhere. The article strongly argues that this is a system-level vulnerability across the globe.
Yeah.
If you are living in Uruguay or Vietnam or Estonia or really any small to medium-sized market, you are always at risk of being a second-tier priority for these global corporate communication teams.
The massive markets get the press release and the action first, and everyone else gets it whenever the paperwork is finally done.
Precisely. And that is why the article presents this case not just as a historical record of what happened in Georgia, but as a genuinely replicable model for other nations to use. It actually outlines a very clear 5-step checklist for what it calls the digital ecosystem method.
Let's run through that checklist really quickly, because I think it is incredibly valuable for any of our listeners who work in health policy or administration.
Yeah.
So, step 1, monitor international signals. Do not rely solely on the local corporate representative in your country to tell you there is a problem. You have to watch Reuters, watch the FDA in the US, watch the European regulatory agencies constantly.
Conduct an independent risk assessment. If you see the signal is out there globally, you should assume your country is affected until definitively proven otherwise. Do not wait for the official affected list on a corporate website to update.
Which brings us to step 3, which seems obvious but is probably skipped all the time.
Rapid translation. You have to take that dense technical data from the European Medicines Agency or the FDA and put it into the local language immediately. A highly technical PDF written in English is completely useless to a grandmother trying to buy formula in rural Georgia.
And step 4 is the secret sauce we spent so much time discussing.
Algorithm-aware dissemination. You must structure the public warning so that search engines and AI language models can actually read it and prioritize it. If you fail at this step, your warning technically exists, but it is effectively invisible to the people who need it.
And finally, step 5.
Constructive engagement with regulators. This is really important. PHIG didn't just go online and attack the government for being slow. They provided the hard, structured evidence that actually allowed the government to act. They created a safe environment where the National Food Agency could step in and issue the recall confidently.
It really strikes me how incredibly cost-effective this entire model is. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't need a multi-million-dollar public relations budget to improve your SEO or to just monitor global news wires.
That is the beauty of it. It is fundamentally an intellectual solution, not a financial one.
Right.
It requires deep expertise, sure. You need a team of people who understand medicine, crisis communication, and back-end coding. But it doesn't require heavy, expensive infrastructure. It completely levels the playing field between a small sovereign country and a giant multinational corporation.
It really empowers the local level to basically hack the global safety net to make sure it actually covers their citizens.
It proves that in the modern era, information speed is quite literally a form of biosecurity. If you can move the truth faster than the risk can move through the supply chain, you save lives.
It also changes how we have to think about medical education going forward. We usually think of public health experts purely as epidemiologists or statisticians running regressions. Do we now need them to be web developers too?
We certainly need them to be digitally literate, at the very least. They don't necessarily need to write the schema markup code themselves, but they absolutely need to understand how the digital ecosystem filters and ranks information.
Because if they don't,
If a top health official doesn't understand how Google or ChatGPT ranks a page, they are fighting a modern crisis with one hand tied behind their back.
the Nestlé recall was basically a massive stress test for the global health system.
It was. And in this specific case, the Georgian model passed the test with flying colors. But it only passed because an independent variable, which was the PHIG, stepped in to drastically accelerate the process.
The official, centralized channels were simply too slow for the biological reality of the toxin.
That is the ultimate summary here. Centralized corporate disclosure is rapidly becoming obsolete as a primary safety mechanism.
It just can't keep up.
It is way too slow for the speed of modern risk and complex global supply chains. We desperately need distributed, independent, and highly visible verification systems, just like the one we saw deployed in Georgia.
It is a really compelling argument. We often just sit back and blindly assume that if a product is sitting on the shelf at the grocery store, it must be safe because the system is always checking it. But this deep dive clearly shows that the system has a lot of lag.
And that lag is exactly where the independent expert and, frankly, the informed citizen really has to step in and bridge the gap.
So here is a final provocative thought for you to carry with you after today's discussion. We live in a deeply interconnected world driven by algorithms, AI, and incredibly complex global supply chains. Next time a massive crisis breaks, whether it is a global food recall or a brand new virus, where are you going to look for your critical information?
Will you wait for the official press release that has been slowly sanitized by a corporate legal team?
Or will you look for the independent, credible voice that actually knows how to speak to the machine and get you the truth fast? It is definitely something to think about.
It is the defining question of modern health literacy.
Thank you for listening to the GMJ Podcast. For a full and detailed discussion of the topic presented in this episode, we invite you to consult the original article published in the Georgian Medical Journal. A direct link is provided in the episode description. We look forward to continuing these scholarly discussions in future episodes.